And basically, it's my belief that until you release that emotional pressure, you cannot return back to this place that you want to be, which is present, creative, proper decision making, problem solving.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. His name is Pearce Cucchissi. He's a former member of U.S. Army Special Operations under the 75th Ranger Regiment. He has trained and led both domestic and foreign special operations teams in combat throughout the Middle East. After his military service, he's led health and performance optimization programs alongside neurologists and sports psychologists. And he now runs Evolve, which is a coaching and advisory service that helps individuals and teams engineer mental freedom to achieve progress and results. Some of Pearce's clients include financial institutions, tech CEOs, NFL athletes, real estate executives, and entrepreneurs. Pearce, thank you so much for joining us here today.
It's good to be here, Talor. Thanks for the invite.
Awesome, man. Well, you've worked with actually, let's start with a little bit of the backstory on obviously some of your upbringing and experiences that led you into kind of this peak performance, mental performance type of training that you do today.
Yeah, interesting question. If we take it all the way back, it was really one of my biggest interests, even growing up. I think kind of coming up through athletics as well, was always really into the training aspect, was never really the biggest, was never the strongest, was never the most athletically talented. I kind of had to find other ways to do that and get an edge. So a lot of it was technique based, fitness based, which I kind of found a niche in there. And really throughout, I played kind of all the typical sports growing up, ended up settling on water polo and rugby through, high school and college, and was really, really always interested in the training. How do I get my body better? How do I get myself to feel better? What kind of edge do I get? And so it started off very physical. And then it wasn't until I started to go into, I realized a lot of that upbringing had mental components to it. And that's part of why I succeeded. But I wasn't really conscious of it, I think, until I went in and tried to go down the military special operations route, where you really see that it is a mindset that is the biggest piece of it. And that's the reason why, right? Nobody has these wildly incredible genetics over another. We're all just kind of, on the same scale, but it's those that can find peace in their mind under, let's say, uncomfortable situations that can help them pull through. And then the fascination just kept going from there. And even all the way through, was, okay, how do I get myself to perform better? Once again, in the military, I'm not the biggest, strongest, fastest, smartest. Then how do I get the guys under me to perform better? And then on the way out, as I left, okay, now how do I reset everything? Right? Because the military experience didn't get everything right. It left a lot of things kind of on the back burner, hurt. So I had to figure that out as well.
Wow, that's fascinating, man. And I love that concept of, not being the strongest or the fastest. I always say this sometimes in business as well. Like, I'm not the smartest. I'm not a genius over here. I'm in plenty of, business groups where there's a lot of people a lot smarter than me. But yet, there's mental models and frame, and things you can do. So let's maybe kind of move into a little bit more of that, which is what you're training, professional athletes on, tech CEOs, things of that nature. What are some of the things that what are maybe some of the high level concepts that you are kind of teaching these people?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ones. The first one that I like to start with is this idea of burnout. Everybody's quite familiar with it. Now, burnout looks different for different people. Sometimes it's more physical, mental, emotional, or it comes up in the relationships. The beginning is to say, okay, how do I get you to operate in a way where you can continue to sustain the pace at which you're moving? The frame is not strong, right? I'll give you the example. We'll do the analogy with a car. If I have a crack in the frame of my brand new Ferrari and I drop a huge, powerful engine on it, doesn't matter how good that engine is if the frame can't handle it. So I try to make sure that the frame is incredibly solid. so that no matter what your business, your boss, your team, whatever throws at you, you know confidently that you have the tools to handle that. That covers everything from physical health, mental health, all of that. Then what we typically go into is, none of this is rocket science. We do goal setting. Okay, you're currently here. Let's take you to the highest levels of essentially becoming a corporate athlete, a professional athlete. What does that look like for you? What do you want to be doing? Most people know what to do, or they can gather the information of what to do fairly easily. But there are personal things that get in the way, or what I call these roadblocks.
Mm-hmm.
These could be anything: physical energy. These could be lacks in confidence. This could be not knowing how to deal with people. This could be not having accountability for yourself, right? So part of my difficulty in explaining this entire process is the depth and breadth at which this goes. Right? It's all different for everybody, but we kind of try to get to the same goal.
Yeah.
So I know that's high level for you.
That's really good. That's really good. What, as it relates to health, maybe let's touch a little bit about health. What are you, right? Like I once told people, like, look, I can sum up, being healthy for you in about 30 seconds, right? Like, don't eat sugar, limit the alcohol, don't eat fried foods, eat plant, eat whole foods and, whatever, right? Like literally in less than 1 minute, someone can tell you how to, what to do in terms of like the actual what to do. So it's not hard to really get that information, especially if you're seeking it. But so then why aren't people doing, taking these actions? People want, they say they want to get healthier, yet they're not, they're not eating, their habits aren't showing it, their actions aren't showing it.
Yeah. And so that's a difficult fact-finding mission. And why I think the process that I run is so effective is because I don't come in and I say, hey, I'm a nutritionist, follow this plan.
Mm-hmm.
Because the plan doesn't matter. It does eventually, but I could be the top nutritionist in the entire world. And I could give you a plan that took me hours to create. But if you don't follow the plan because stress of work triggers a reaction that has you seeking comfort in junk food, then it's just a piece of paper worth nothing. So the way that I come at it is I basically look at people in 4 categories. And this goes for everything, right? But on a physical plane, they go from unconscious, which means they basically have no awareness of their physical body or how it affects anything, and they don't do anything about it. They're conscious, meaning that they're aware, they know what they should do, they just can't seem to do it. They're deliberate, which is they're doing it, they're making the actions, maybe they're not super accountable, maybe they're not really seeing the results. We need to tweak some things, there's still some roadblocks. And then we're expansive, which means that the physical body is essentially used as a weapon for success, and we're always growing and evolving. So usually I find out which one of those categories people are in, and I say, okay, let's say in the next 3 months, we're going to get you to the next category. We're up 2 categories. So I look at everything. Yes, what you said is true. Drop the sugar, get enough sleep, get outside, do some sort of exercise daily, anything, right? Anything that you like. And then it goes beyond that. We work on things like circadian rhythms, right? Timing your body to the sun. The sun is what gives everything energy and life, even the food that we eat. Getting a little bit more detailed in how we eat, making sure the sources are really whole foods. You're not pumping yourself with other chemicals all the time. We may play with things like ice and heat, right? Hormetic stressors to help us deal with our stress response. Things like breath work, again, to deal with CO2, to be able to calm the nervous system. Let's see what else. There's the physical exercise, resistance exercise. We'll go in deeper, right? We'll create a purpose around this. And the idea of purpose I find to be the most important, right? Because once again, we can go through all these things, but if you don't have a detailed reason for why you're doing it, you eventually come off. And this was a lesson that I learned in the selection course of the military, which is basically like the tryouts. If the guys there did not have a very deep-seated reason why they were there, then the stress caused their brain to think negative thoughts and they would eventually quit. So your reason for being there has to be deeper than any level of stress that comes up, right? Maybe you have a good physical fitness plan and then stress of work up to a level of 6 takes you out of it. Okay, we need to rework the plan. Now a stress level of 10 takes you away from your physical plan. Okay, let's rework the why again. So it's a simple questioning of asking people why and making sure that is super important. Because if the why is really important, right? If you could have a why of, oh, I just want to look better and feel a little bit better. Or you could have a why of, I want to make sure that I can spend time and run around with my kids. If I'm unable to do that, I'm going to feel like a failure as a father. If I feel like a failure as a father, then I have no purpose essentially in my life. And my life's greatest purpose is to be able to give my kids the absolute best experience that they can have throughout the short amount of time that I'm with them. And I want to make sure that I'm around in 100% health. And that is the biggest priority I have. They're two very different things.
Yeah.
Very different mental models that you're building to help you accomplish the task. So a lot of what I'm doing is focused on that. Yeah, here's the physical plans and actions I think you should take, but let's talk about why you're doing them.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that was a lot of really powerful stuff there, starting with, yeah, I mean, a personalized, like you said, if they're not there mentally, and that's why I love these conversations, because, we've had guests on this podcast that have talked about how to lose weight by intermittent fasting, and other people how to lose weight doing keto, and other people how to lose weight eating 5 small meals a day, which is the complete opposite. And every one of them has clients that get results, but it's not, and I think there was some study, I can't remember the exact study, but it was something like, pretty much all the diets, most of the diets pretty much all worked if the person believed it was going to work and actually like took the actions and followed through with it. So then it's really about the mental game, in really all areas of life. And yeah, that whole, I remember for a while, I'm glad you gave the example, because, there's like the book Start With Why, and everyone's like, you got to find your why. And it sounds amazing. But at first I was like, man, what, I don't know, like, do I really know what my why is? But as you started talking about it, I realized in my morning routine, I'm constantly visualizing about helping to raise my grandchildren, and even being alive to see my great grandkids. Right. And I'm visualizing this every morning. So yeah, that is a pretty powerful why, compared to just like, another thing. Oh, I just want to feel a little better or whatever. So that's really powerful.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. I think there's an easy way for people to get there too, which is take a piece of paper, write the goal, and then act like a little kid and just keep asking yourself why until you get stuck and frustrated with it. Then take a break, and the next day see if you can go even deeper. Okay, I want to get healthy. Why? Okay, write that answer. Why again? Write that answer. Why again? And just keep going and going and push yourself to do that. Easy way to get there.
I like that. I like that a lot. And then also, I know, kind of like thinking, for me, it's also helpful thinking of myself as like, I'm 100 years old, looking back on my life, and, things like that, doing that kind of looking out into the future and looking back on my life is also very helpful for me. And seeing what's really important, right? Like when I think about, for me, if me, my wife, and my 2 daughters, all live happy, healthy lives as a close-knit family, and we all live to 100 years old, and have a great family bond, and go on family vacations every year. Like, if I achieve that, almost everything else is secondary, in life, right? So now it's like, oh wow, okay, so that's the priority, health. And I try to get a lot of business people to understand this, because I'm in some groups, and there's some really successful business people, but it's like, man, what's the point of making $100 million if you pass away at age 65 when you could have lived to 95 or whatever, right? Your family needs you. They want you there. That's more important. And people not prioritizing their health, not, saying, oh, I don't have time to go to the gym, and they're working, 10 hours a day or whatever. It's an interesting how people don't have the same priorities.
Yeah, well, we could even break that down more kind of on a micro scale, right? You made a fantastic point. Yeah, what's the point of $100 million if you don't live past 50?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen multiple people where that has happened to them, right? We see it all the time, dying early, having major health issues. But let's not look too deep into the future. Let's just do it on today. The body sets the tone for the mind. If you are in business, that means you are essentially a mental, strategic athlete, let's call it. You are relying on brain power, you're relying on presence, creativity, and problem solving. Now, all of that is housed within the human system that lives within a body. So if I am completely unhealthy, let's go back to the car analogy. Let's say I'm pouring some hot sauce in my gas tank, and I got one tire that is completely deflated. We can never expect the car to operate properly. So all of these brain functions that I mentioned that take specific neurochemical environments and energy to run are all dependent on the state of your body. So if someone, even if, doesn't matter how good they are in business, if they are extremely unhealthy, they are leaving potential on the table, no matter what. And I know that nobody in business doesn't want to be leaving potential on the table. They try it for a little while, get themselves healthy, get themselves energized in the morning, feeling good. Their brain is firing. They don't need things like drugs, caffeine, anything outside what they already have in their system. They will notice the difference. Focus, clarity, creativity, problem solving, attention, all of it goes up when the body is set up in a place to foster that. And so to me, it's an absolutely critical part of being in business as well. It's not just for sports athletes.
Amazing. Amazing. Along those lines, I'd love to know, what are your kind of maybe a morning routine and kind of exercise routine? Would love to hear that.
Yeah, so I split things up. I no longer beat my body up as much as I used to back in the military days. So a lot of it was kind of rehabbing things. So usually it will be some sort of breath work and meditation to get the mind and body started. Around 2 to 3 days a week of resistance exercise. The other days of the week, I try to train the sports that I really enjoy: cycling, mountain biking, surfing. If the conditions aren't good for those, I will again work some sort of different type of movement pattern or cardiovascular activity, a bunch of different things to play with. But usually these workouts are quite intense and they only last 30 minutes or so on the working phase. And then I will go utilize time for some mobility, as that was a big issue for me in the military and in sport. And after that, always bring the nervous system back down from a workout, which means specific breathing or meditative techniques to kind of reset that, because your body's in a stressed out state. Refuel, get to work. Pretty
Nice.
simple.
And so you're doing mobility after your strength training, typically?
Depends on how I feel. Sometimes it'll be a little bit before or after. I make sure that the mobility does not include any sort of heavy stretching before strength work. So you don't want to be strengthening the muscle and then putting it under a ton of stress. But most of my mobility now is more mobility instead of stretching. So it's actually just working the muscles through a specific range of motion and trying to release tension with prolonged pressure.
I like that. Yeah, I'm definitely moving more towards that. Although, static stretching, sometimes if I'm half asleep and get to the gym and the hamstrings are tight, I'll do it, I'm not going to do long term. I'm not going to sit there for 2 minutes, but I do feel a little good sometimes. But I do need to change that, because I've been hearing this a lot about, not doing static stretching really especially before strength training, doing more active mobility kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, what I noticed through all the testing on myself and science is that the stretching never really results in a long-term effect that we want. The muscles are really only designed to go through a certain range of motion. And when we stretch them, especially when we're cold, we're just putting a stress response on the muscle and it tightens right back up, right? Every day you feel like you have to go back and stretch. This idea of prolonged pressure is actually what teaches the muscles and nerves to relax. So you hear about people like laying on a lacrosse ball, or a foam roller, or taking some other tools with specific edges and placing them inside the pec minor or inside of your hips, and literally just laying on them and relaxing. And that kind of teaches the muscle to let go. And it's really, really interesting, because I've done some work where I have a lot of lower back issues. And when I release my shoulders, the back frees up. So it's always looking in different places. Everything is so interconnected that we have to look at, okay, if one place didn't really release it, let me try something else. Where along the chain could the root cause of the problem be?
Mm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Any recommendations in terms of for people who are listening right now and they're like, okay, I want to start doing more mobility stuff. Obviously, we'll talk about how people can work with you soon, but if people just want to kind of check anything out, are there any kind of recommendations as a type of mobility training or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a ton. I would look to, especially if you're getting older, look into specific forms of Tai Chi. There is also, videos on YouTube. People call it animal flow. It's a lot of like moving through different positions on the ground, just to kind of play with different movement patterns. I think is really good. Most people just go sitting, standing, walking. That's kind of our typical movement. And then some other, prolonged pressure tools. One I really like, there's a company called Aletha Health that makes a couple of tools that may look pretty different to people and they can try. And that's what, releases key muscles within the body.
Wow, I'm glad I asked. I wasn't expecting that. Tai Chi and animal movement was the other one?
Yeah, so if you just typed in like animal flow,
Animal flow.
there's a bunch of different like companies that do it. That's kind of the basic overview, but it's just movement patterns, different movement patterns to test different end ranges of motion and balance and things, to try to get you moving like a little kid again.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I have a trainer at the gym that I use not for strength training, but for mobility to force me that
Oh,
once a week to do that mobility and put me through some more challenging type of mobility. So yeah, highly recommend that. And that's kind of a recurring theme is the importance of mobility these days. So yeah, that's a really good one. Um, I do want to get back to the mental stuff is so much more interesting, because you've got so much knowledge with this kind of stuff. What else can we talk about in terms of how people can, maybe other mental models that you're using, other kind of frameworks or things that people can use to, if they just, again, someone like myself, I want to continue to be in better shape, plus have my mind sharp for business, plus be a great father and a great husband, and continue to improve in all areas.
one of the biggest ones, which I love, and it's very difficult to get people to do, even yourself to do. I'll describe it as releasing emotional constipation,
Mm,
which means let's take a little kid, your daughters, for example, when they were babies, they had the ability to go from laughing, playing, having a good time. You take their toy away, they scream, cry, throw a fit, and 5 minutes later, they're happy and giggling again. Have you experienced that? Or
absolutely.
something along the sorts? Okay. They were able to process and move emotion, energy in motion. It's energetic in the body. They're doing whatever they can emotionally, physically to process that energy out. We as adults, because it's not really accepted by society, unlearn how to do that. Now, I'm not saying something happens to you at work and you should throw a fit, but you need to have some sort of way to deal with it. If the emotions do not get processed out, they get stored inside of us. This creates behavioral changes that can last for life, that can have people easily triggered, stressed, doing behaviors that they don't want to be doing. That list goes on and on. But essentially, how we release the emotional constipation, the best way that I've found to do it, because we also can't just use Band-Aid solutions. You can't just breathe your way through it. But it works in the moment. It works to calm you in the moment. But eventually, you need to sit down. People do this with therapy, with therapists, and that seems to help. But why should I have to rely on a therapist to handle all of my problems? Why can't I just take a pen and a paper and essentially go through the emotional fit verbally that little kid through? You may actually start feeling things in the body. You can use anger for an example. You might start feeling even more angry. People don't want to do that. But eventually you get to the place where you kind of let it all out. After that, you change your story, right? That initial emotion was driven by a story about the situation that we had. So we take a look at the facts without the emotion. We change the story and we get an action plan. And we say, okay, now I have an action plan to move through.
That
All
is
said.
that is powerful. I hope people re-listen to that. You might want to rewind that last couple of minutes and re-listen to that, because that is really powerful. I don't want to understate how powerful that is, what you just said. Yeah, I mean, it's such a difference, right? With people who can, for people who where something is said or something happens and it affects them in a certain way, and they're holding on to it for hours or days or weeks or years, compared to someone who can kind of learn to train themselves to let it go and move on like a kid does, like you said.
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful. Like I said, people seek out tons of therapies, utilizing psychedelics and things like that do a lot of the same thing, but you can't do those things every day. You can't do them multiple times a day. So you need to have something in your back pocket to release that pressure. And basically, it's my belief that until you release that emotional pressure, you cannot return back to this place that you want to be, which is present, creative, proper decision making, problem solving, loving, whatever those are for you. If there's any sort of blockage in there, it keeps you from doing that. And we see that over and over again. And I'm sure everybody listening to this can relate. And I can certainly relate, because I probably had to do this more than anybody else.
Yes, yes, that is powerful. And so what about in the moment, right? So one of the biggest things I've been working on is also kind of the same thing with the energy. And then specifically though, right? In the moment when you feel yourself about to be reactive, right? Whatever it is, your kid won't listen to you, you told them something 5 times or whatever, and then you're about to like cross that line where you're going to yell at them or whatever. Any tools or tricks or techniques in that moment?
Yeah, we'll talk about two. One's awareness, and then the Band-Aid solutions, which I mentioned. The awareness piece is how early you notice it.
Hmm.
For example, if you only notice that you're getting angry after the 5th time you told your kid something, you don't have much of a time window to do anything. If you notice after the 2nd time, you go, oh, there it is again. I'm feeling that I'm getting reactive. Okay, take a step back. How much more of a time window did you buy yourself? Now, the key there, like I said, is the awareness. You have to know what the physical or mental signs of your own anger are.
Hmm.
So this is different for everybody. Do you get tightness in your chest? Do you start speaking faster? Do you fidgeting? Your hands get clammy? The list goes on. You need to know that, and you need to be able to understand even the smallest changes in that. Can you measure a 5% increase in your heart rate without measuring it, right? Just by feeling it? That would be super interesting. Then so that's buying yourself time. That's the awareness to utilize the tool that will help you within the situation. Now let's talk about, okay, what do you do to bring yourself back down? The biggest one is 2. There's body-centric awareness, and then we'll use breath work. So breath work is an easy one. All you got to do is exhale longer than you inhale, and it teaches your body to slow the heart rate down. It will also help with the stress hormones and things that are circulating in the body, like cortisol. So literally, all it is make sure that you're breathing from the belly and not from the chest, and long, slow exhales. Just take a moment before getting reactive and just do some of that. The body-centric awareness, the idea around this is that the body only reacts to the present moment, but what it thinks is the present moment is driven by your mind, right? So right now you're sitting in a room, you're completely safe, your body should be relaxed. If I had you envision something that made you incredibly sad or incredibly angry, you would start to feel that in your body. Everybody's felt that, right? We know this is a fact from a nightmare, right? People are not in a nice cozy bed and they wake up in a panic attack. Okay, so the body only reacts to the present moment, but if the mind is somewhere else, it's going to react to that. So put all the awareness from mind to body. An easy way to do that just focus on the feeling of your feet in your shoes. I like to put the awareness of my heart. Let me see if I can feel my heartbeat without actually touching it. Now, when you do this, you could do this right now while you're listening to me. You don't actually have to process the English language. It will just come to you and register. So you can put your focus from anything that was out there in the ether to just in your body. And that syncs present moment with a safe body where you are right now. And that is a really good tool in the moment.
That is good, man. I could tell you've got a ton of powerful techniques like this. I know we're only scratching the surface here. Quick question on the breathing. Is it nose breathing? Like, I've heard a lot of people saying that when you breathe, it should be mostly through your nose, but also I have also heard though in like yoga, people doing, exhaling more through the mouth. I was just curious on yours.
Always through the nose,
Mhm.
unless you absolutely need to use the mouth. You can do that kind of yoga constricted mouth exhale. There's nothing necessarily wrong with it. You're offloading CO2 a lot quicker. But if you keep it through the nose, especially on the inhale, that's the way that your body is designed to breathe, right? A certain constriction of air that goes when you use your nasal cavities. And when you fill up your belly, you've actually got more blood vessels kind of on the bottom of your lungs, so you get a better oxygen transfer. The mouth breathing should really only be used when your heart rate is extremely high and you need to take in more air and you need to take it in faster. So think sprinting.
Yep. Yep. That makes a lot of sense. Yep. That's yeah, I mean, there was a book, I think by James Nestor called Breathe, and pretty much the biggest takeaway of the book was like breathe through your nose as much as possible. And now we see even people taping their mouth at night to ensure that they're breathing through their nose when they sleep. So yeah.
It's funny, there's a very popular derogatory term within military ranks, instructors calling people mouth breathers. As in they're the dumb ones or the ones most likely to fail. I don't think they ever actually understood the physiology behind it. They just noticed the guys that would stand there kind of with their mouth open breathing. Those were the ones that went easily. But it's because they were the ones that were most stressed and they didn't have the tool or the awareness to keep the body in a place where the stress levels are kept even, which is you can do incredibly well through the breath. And that's most optimally done through the nose. So I just thought that was a pretty interesting anecdote. I had heard it for years before I really started studying the breath.
That is a great tip. That is a great tip. You seem to know a lot about kind of while we're on this topic, with regards to like CO2 and oxygen and things of that nature. Can you just talk a little bit about how that plays a role in your nervous system?
Yeah. So it's basically the breath is the only thing that we have that we can take control over. It's similar to the mind, right? If you forgot to breathe, you would keep breathing. You don't have to actually think about it, but you can also take control. You can go, okay, I'm going to breathe in for 2, out for 10. There's nothing else in your body you can do that with besides, physical motion, but there's no process. You can't do that with your heart. You can't do that with circulation of your blood, your brain waves, any of those things. You can influence them, but you can't just take direct control. The other part with the attachment to the nervous system is called the vagus nerve, which kind of runs throughout kind of the center column of your body, touches a lot of the major organs. And so when you breathe from your diaphragm, you actually press on the vagus nerve and stimulate it, right? The same thing as if I was to massage my hand, more blood would start going to the hand, right? So we're essentially massaging the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is associated with parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest, digest, relax, recover. So it's essentially the breath being the best tool that we have to stimulate that nerve and to stimulate the parasympathetic. As I mentioned before, too, the extended exhales allows the heart rate to drop further. When you exhale, Diaphragm goes up, space around the heart gets smaller, which means the blood circulates faster and the heart doesn't have to work as hard to pump it. So for example, if you can get yourself to a 2-second inhale and a 10-second exhale, you are relatively in a good state of relaxation.
That is really good. Actually, I had not realized that before about it stimulating the vagus nerve when you breathe through your stomach, through your nose. That was really good. That's a really good tip. And so, yeah, anytime people want to calm themselves down, right? If they're overly excited, if they're, angry, whatever it is. So you think 2 seconds in through your nose and then 10 seconds out through your nose, ideally will definitely slow you down and calm you, relax you.
And if you're not calm and you can't do that, start with 2 seconds in and 4 seconds out, and then continue to keep going. 3 seconds in and 6 seconds out, 4 seconds in and 8 seconds out, and then 2 seconds in and 8 seconds out, and then 2 and 10, right? So it's basically that progression. That's how you can work yourself down. Because if you're extremely stressed out or you just came back from a run, you won't be able to just go 2 in, 10 out. The buildup of CO2 is too high. So you need to slowly be able to work yourself down. And what I'm saying is when you can do the 2 in, 10 out comfortably, you can, with good reason, say, okay, now I am relaxed, when you don't feel like you're starving for air.
Right. Man, this is great. And I could tell you have a lot of frameworks, and both mental and physical. I just love when we have people, which, first of all, thank you for your service and everything you've done for our country. And now being able to utilize everything you've learned and continuing to learn both mentally and physically. This has been awesome. It's been a pleasure to just scratch the surface, and I'm sure people are going to want to learn more from you. What's the best place for people to follow you, learn more from you?
Yeah, I'm willing to chat with anybody, and we can talk about doing some training or specific protocols for them. You can easily reach me just through the website at built2evolve.com. That's probably the easiest way. Go in there, shoot the contact form, send me an email, let's chat. And then, coming out within the next 6 months or so, I'm going to have a platform that could essentially do this training for entire companies. And so I'm looking forward to that.
Nice. So built2evolve.com. Definitely check them out. And who would be kind of like your ideal client there? And is it mostly one-on-one, or mostly businesses or groups of people? Who would be the ideal person to hire you?
Ideal person is the one with the willingness to learn. Right? Because it doesn't really matter. I'm dealing with human issues, not industry specific issues, even though I can relate them to all of it. So, I do individuals, entrepreneurs, athletes, and then also work with a lot of the larger businesses in investment banking and real estate and healthcare, professional sports teams. So, I'm really happy to find a solution for any of them. We do one-on-one work, we do small group trainings, speaking engagements, all the above.
Amazing. Well, Pearce, thank you so much for your time here today. This has been awesome. And I know that we've only scratched the surface. So highly recommend people go learn more from you and follow you. Any social media or YouTube videos and stuff like that people could watch of you as well?
You can find other podcasts and anything on that website that I mentioned. Yeah. That's probably the easiest way to check it out. I'm also, you can find me on Instagram, Pearce, PEARCE_C2.
Amazing. Well, thanks again, man. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to connecting again here in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. And just a reminder, if you haven't yet tried any of our Peak Performance products, you get 20% off your first order. We have one of the largest selection of USDA certified organic superfood powders, as well as very high quality supplements. And you get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com. That's www.buypeakperformance.com.